Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another edition of News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaba bikum. My name is Yunus Sekur and I will be in your company for the next 2 hours from 8:20 to just past 10 p.m. I'll be interviewing our guests shortly. I've got a packed studio of vibrant civic representatives from various ratepayer associations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 seated, 7 in Durban, and I've got 5 in Pietermaritzburg. So 12 guests between Durban and Pietermaritzburg. And it shows the kind of interest that ratepayer associations, have taken to improve service delivery in the KwaZulu-Natal area. Today, the date is the 20th November 2024, and equivalent to 19 Jumadal Ula 1446 AH. On tonight's show, we're going to continue with a series of discussions on ratepayer associations and their involvement in local government to improve service delivery. And we know that this is all going to culminate to local government elections 2026. We know in the last national and provincial elections, there's been a massive shift in the voting patterns, throughout the political spectrum. And we know that the ruling party, had a lot of movement away from them towards other parties, MK, IFP, Democratic Alliance, and others. The ratepayer associations are expected the situation to be more vibrant come 2026 local government elections. So tonight we're talking about the ratepayer associations' involvement in local government to improve service delivery. And there'll be an update on the water curtailment program in municipalities and other deliverables if we got time. So with me live in the studio, I have representatives from the Ashaval Ratepayer Association, Dr. Annie Singh. She's the chairperson of the Ashaval Ratepayers Association. Annie, good evening and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Good evening, Mr. Sekur. Good evening to the residents and the listeners. And we just want to thank you for this opportunity, for inviting us back to your studio to be engaged and involved in these discussions. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure having you all here. We also have Shaista Ghafoor. She's the secretary of Ashaval Ratepayers Association. Shaista, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome to News in Focus.
Wa alaikum salam, Mr. Sekur. Shukran for having us on your program.
It's a pleasure. We also have Alison Skuman. She's from the eThekwini United Ratepayers Business and Civic Organization. Good evening, Alison, and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Good evening, Mr. Sekur. Thank you so much for having me. I really am grateful for this opportunity, and I hope I will do the listeners proud tonight.
No, it's a pleasure. We also have Norman Gilbert. He's the chair of Bluff Ratepayers Association. Norman, good evening and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sekur, for this opportunity, and also a very warm good evening to all your listeners.
And I look forward to interacting with you all, because back in the day when I was in local government, I used to interact with more than 100 civic and ratepayer associations. So it's reminding me of those good old days when I used to hear the attacks of the various civic associations against the municipality at that point in time. Yet we were delivering, but still they were concerned about other things. We also have Ernest Smith, Councillor, Ward 27. Now, Ernest is going to take all the flag this evening because he's representing a eThekwini municipality. I know he'll tell you I'm on the opposition bench. Ernest, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus once again.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having me again. Oh, hello, thank you. I do appreciate it.
No, and we have you here in case they attack eThekwini, then you can either defend or support what they say, Ernest.
I'm always in the hot seat, so...
Right, I want to welcome my guests from my favorite studio in KwaZulu-Natal, the PMberg studio in Ottoman Road in Mountain Rise. We have Anthony Walthausen from the Association of Resident Ratepayers and Civic, from an organization called MARC in PMberg. I believe they are 11 ratepayer associations that are working together. Anthony, good evening and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International. On Radio Al Ansar International. On Radio Al Ansar International. You can go ahead, Anthony. I think the guys wanted to hear me 3 times when the thing repeated itself. So go for it, Anthony. 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 We have a little bit of a technical problem. Anthony, can you hear me in Pietermaritzburg? Okay, we'll reconnect to Pietermaritzburg shortly. We just checked. There's a technical hitch. There are 4 Ratepayer Association members in Pietermaritzburg, but let's just kick off with a discussion with our Ratepayer Associations in Durban while we're trying to get connected to Pietermaritzburg. Annie, I'd like to commence with you. I just want you to sort of give us a bit of a preamble of which areas in Asheville that you are taking care of. I know is it Ward 31 or Ward 32? And what is your constituency? I know you've got various members in your chat group, but also you cover various areas. So those that are listening know that if they've got issues, they should be joining your group or talking to you.
Thank you so very much for that, Mr. Sekur. Basically, we're in Ward 31. Ward 31 is comprised of Musgrave, Overport, Asheville, and Sydenham. And because we, the Asheville ratepayers, and I think the name would indicate that our focus is really on the relevant area. And basically, we have approximately 30 streets in Asheville. So as the Ratepayer Association, we are focused on service delivery issues with regard to those particular streets that comprise Asheville. Because we're located in an area which borders on Sydenham and parts of Overport, when there are issues that concern these areas as well, we do assist and we do help the residents in those areas. So what I want to say is that even though we the Asheville Ratepayer Association, which predominantly covers Asheville, I think because the ward is so expansive and because of the issues, for example, if it's power or if it is water cuts or if there are issues that deal with the area more holistically, then obviously we are involved with the other areas as well, giving feedback, giving updates wherever we can.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
basically
I
what
note
we
that,
cover.
with the Overport Ratepayers Association, there's a lot of interaction, and including the Springtown Ratepayers, because you all are closely located and there may be
Absolutely.
common issues and basically outages may be in the different areas or jointly in those areas.
Absolutely. Thank you for that observation. That is actually correct. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Springfield Ratepayers Association, because at this point in time, you might or you might not be aware of the fact that we have started working on a project which impacts on them directly. But the way we see it is that it also impacts on Asheville residents with regard to the emerging taxi rank that we've objected to. So we've got a number of signatures in terms of a Google form that we've commenced and that we've started, and we hope that that would be sufficient in terms of the objections that we've lodged because of the impact it's going to have in the area. But you're absolutely correct about it. I think that, since I've been involved in the ratepayer group and with the ratepayer associations, there's just been this insurgence and interest in what is going on. And basically, we can see this all over eThekwini. And I know that you have other guests in the studio. And what is also arisen as a result of this is that there are a lot of merging of ratepayer associations, obviously, mainly because of the fact that they are common issues. So you'd have correctly identified what the position is.
And I think
Yeah,
you're
thank you for
also
that.
objecting to the Jadu Road housing project. So I'm sure we'll chat about that a little bit later.
Yes.
But I think our technical issues have been sorted out. So let's
great.
introduce our guest to Pietermaritzburg. Anthony Walthausen, he is the Association of Residents, Ratepayers and Civics in Mark. Anthony, good evening and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International. Hello, Anthony, are you there? Or we still have a technical hitch? Anthony, can you hear us? It seems as though we got a slight technical hitch in PMburg. We're having some issues because of some amendments or repairs done in the studio. But we'll get back to Anthony. Let me just chat briefly to Alison. Alison, you sort of belong to the eThekwini United Ratepayers Association and civic organizations. Perhaps you want to just give us an indication which areas you cover and your constituents.
Yes, thank you very much. So, the eThekwini United Ratepayers Business and Civics Organizations covers practically the entire eThekwini area. We obviously Asherville is one of our associate members, and then we've got Bluff, Clear Estate, Isipingo, Musgrave, New Germany, Overport, Sydenham, Tongaat, Verulam, Umbilo, and Umhlanga. So it's pretty much stretches the entire eThekwini. There's 12 associations at the moment. And the purpose of the Umbrella Association is really to collaborate with all the associations in eThekwini and deal with matters or common issues that we have. Specifically, for example, the Eskom electricity hikes, which we know these presentations that's going to be made this week. In fact, I am presenting on Friday on behalf of ERBCO. The focus of this association is then also to empower other associations. You know, when we sit around a table and we discuss problems that are happening in a specific area, you may find that the similar problem is happening in another area. And if we then collaborate and understand the common issues and how eThekwini is addressing it, we can spot the gaps where service delivery is not equal. And of course, we know legislation says service delivery must be equal. So it's quite an important function.
Most certainly. Are we back with Pietermaritzburg? Let's try them once again. Anthony, I've been trying you a couple of times. Are we lucky this time? Good evening and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International.
Good evening. Yes, thanks for inviting us, and we're looking forward to this robust debate.
Okay, you also have Mr. Kanta Naidu from Chairperson of Lincoln Mead Resident and Ratepayer Associations. Is Kanta there?
Yes.
Good evening, Kanta, and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International.
Good evening, Mr. Sakur, and thank you for having us on your program.
Okay, it's a pleasure having you all. Linda Mshali, is she present in the studio? Linda, good evening and welcome. Linda is the chairperson of Woodlands Ratepayers Association. Is she in the studio?
Yes, Mr. Sakur, good evening, and thank you for having us, and thank you to your listeners as well.
Our apologies that we had a bit of a technical hitch and my voice was coming back to me, and I think the guys were hearing me again. Is Madoda Kona also present in the studio from Imbali Residents Association?
Present. Thank you.
Yes, Madoda, good evening and welcome to News in Focus. We're delighted to have you in our studio in Pietermaritzburg chatting to us about municipal issues.
Thank you very much for having us on your show. And as we're virgins today, so thank you for breaking us in.
Yes, and is there anybody else present in the studio that I may welcome?
For now, we're representing Imbali twice.
Okay, that's no problem. Anthony, I just want to come back to you quickly, just to give us a bit of an introduction. I know you mentioned in the last interview I had a few weeks ago that you represent, or your organization represents 11 ratepayer associations. Perhaps if you can just give our listeners a bit of an indication which areas in Pietermaritzburg you'll cover and the sort of manifesto you'll have.
That's correct. We actually have the representation of a wide spectrum of ratepayers association throughout Pietermaritzburg, and the purpose here is to get representation of residents across the board. So we have ratepayers associations from there's Woodlands, Mbali, Greater Indel. Then there's also Subantu, as well as there's Lincoln Mead, as well as there's actually quite 11. Yeah, there's quite a few that are part of the MARC umbrella body.
Okay, I'd like Kanta Naidu to come in there. Perhaps you're the chairperson of Lincoln Mead Resident Ratepayer Associations. Which areas is your ratepayer covering, Kanta?
Well, the Lincoln Mead Ratepayers Association covers a part of Ward 35. Ward 35 comprises of 3 suburbs, namely Lincoln Mead, Mountain Rise, and Subantu. But I represent the Lincoln Mead, particularly the Lincoln Mead area.
And who represents Mountain Rise? That's a big area there in Pietermaritzburg.
Mr. Yunus Bayat. Unfortunately, he was not available this evening.
Okay, we'll bring him on another occasion because there's lots of
Yes.
queries coming from guys. And Linda in Charlie, Woodlands, can you just sort of explain, is it just Woodlands or surrounds of Woodlands you represent?
The Woodlands Ratepayers Association represents Woodlands, but we service the greater part of Ward 32. So which is a good thing for Mark as an association, because the people have seen the work that the association is doing, and it's encouraging them also to go back into their specific areas and open up their Ratepayers Association. So we've also got people coming through for assistance from as far as Eastwood and Glenwood. And then it used to be Panorama as well. And then through Anthony's assistance, Panorama has now become a standalone and have formed their own Ratepayers Association.
Okay, and Madoda Kona, you from Imbali Residents Association, which areas do you cover?
At the moment, as Imbali Residents and Civics Association, we're covering the Imbali area and the greater Innendale area as well. We have had discussions in expanding to other regions, but at the moment, we're covering the north of Pietermaritzburg.
Thank you. I'm just going to chat with our guys from Durban. I'm sure you'll be able to catch a listen to them, and there may be common issues that they will be raising. But I want to bring in Ernest Smith, the councillor from Ward 27. Ernest, you've heard our ratepayer associations talking, and we're going to engage with them. And I'm going to ask them to raise a host of issues which you will respond to. But what I want to hear from you is that, according to a report received from the Presidential eThekwini Working Group, it's a 6-month overview, and they mentioned that they're making a good degree of progress because the areas that they were looking at or addressing was water and sanitation, which dealing with the water curtailment program and water losses, safety and security, which is a crucial issue, tourism and infrastructure, because we're into the December festive season, and they're talking about economic growth, but there's several other deliverables that you all are going to raise, which they're not covering. And they mentioned that in the last 6 months, from May to October 2024, they've made decent progress and they've covered various areas. But one very critical point they made is that they're going to have a quarterly accountability forum to be set up for civil society and all stakeholders, which they're going to form in November 2024. So all the ratepayer associations are going to interact with this presidential working group. And they mentioned that they've received the report from Mike Sutcliffe, or KZN Kokta, to share Section 154 report recommendation. So they're going to present that to council. Now, you interact with councillors in eThekwini, and obviously you're aware of this working group, and you're also aware of the Section 154 investigation. Perhaps you want to comment on are these interventions useful in terms of improving service delivery, or we have to wait and see what happens?
Yeah, I'm gonna give the simple answer and say it depends on who is involved, and there has to be political will to accomplish what we should have already fixed, should have already been in place. I think previously I raised the point to say that we shouldn't have never have gotten to this point. That's the first part. The second part is to say, can these be achieved? Yes, they can. If, and I stress the point, if there's political willpower to do so. It's one thing to speak to issues high, pie in the sky ideals. The reality of it is, if we don't start addressing the issues, making the appropriate budgeting available, having the necessary knowledge and willpower, and all of these would have been encompassed in the report to some degree or another. If you don't have those deliverables in place, you're talking to the wind. It's as simple as that. The reality is the municipality has neglected this for so long. All right. I think previously I mentioned that they've done a couple of 1,000 kilometers in the last 10, 15 years. But what happened in between then? And oddly enough, Mike Sutcliffe was the city manager at that point. So when he left, was there purposeful or intentional non-focus on the infrastructure, or was it something else? Was there political will? Because we know that in the municipality, it's like a car. You have to keep things running. But at the end of the day, if you don't start servicing the units and making the appropriate budgeting that's available, you're not going to accomplish very much. And that is the one thing I always stress in these types of engagements, to say, okay, you want to fix the 15,000 square kilometer burst pipes. You want to do the couple of thousand odd K sewer lines. But the reality is, have you made provision for it? Because it's going to cost over 100 billion just to do that. So at the end of the day, we shouldn't have been here. And I like to stop there for the moment, because this thing really antagonizes me.
Well, listen, one of the concerns that they were addressing is the non-revenue water loss. They say that's reduced since their intervention from 58 to 54%. We need to measure that. But what I want to do is I want to read out what political analyst Imran Bakas mentioned. He says the upcoming political conference divides SA civil society. He says the geopolitical climate has been tense in recent years, largely due to the rise of China as a major economic power and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The recent election of Donald Trump can only inflame the situation. What he's saying now is, in these choppy waters, South Africa's civil society faces a critical question. Should our civil society remain genuinely non-aligned, or will we allow ourselves to be drawn into escalating global tensions? Later on, we're gonna discuss that. Also, responding to Alison, what she mentioned about the electricity tariffs. Perhaps you want to comment, Alison. I want to bring you in. Nicola Daniels, has mentioned that poor people have the choice of either food or electricity, mostly for the pensioners. That's their plight. Putting food on the table or keeping the lights on is the dilemma confronting citizens, as a rocketing electricity prices leave South Africans with little to make ends meet. Now, we know that National Energy Regulator of South Africa kicked off public hearings in different parts of the country, and they're talking about phenomenal increases like 36.15%, etc. And that's compared to last year of 11.81. So Ernest mentioned that these interventions taking place, but a basic necessity like electricity, if it's going to increase to that level, 70% of our communities are poor. How are they going to manage? Because they have the choice. They have to live, have food, and rely on the water supply. But electricity becomes an absolute need. Your comments on that one, Alison?
So I'd like to just expand on what Ernest has said. We can pass the blame to the likes of Mike Sutcliffe or whoever followed after him. But the reality is, majority of our local municipalities are collapsing. So the problem is not at local government level. The problem is the model that has been implemented for local government is not working. Now, just to expand on the comment about electricity, we've had 30 years of democracy. Things were supposed to have improved. But instead, what we are seeing, things are degenerating now at an alarming rate. I mean, promises were made to all the poorer communities that electricity would become established in their homes and they could study like the previously privileged individuals. But instead, the divide and the level of poor is now just being exacerbated. So what these state-owned enterprises don't understand, it's not so easy to just say, well, pass the buck onto the ratepayer, because the poorer becomes poorer. And the rich, they still remain rich. They may have lost a little bit, but they've got the buffer, but the poor people don't have the buffer to absorb that. And we've got to ask ourselves, how is this going to affect the future of our country, and whether people really are better off now than what they were 30 years ago? Because I'm not so sure everybody would agree that things are much better now with the democracy in place.
That's a debate we're going to take care of later. Norman, I want to bring you in. You're the chair of Bluff Ratepayers Association, and it's an upmarket area. I know the property prices are quite high in the Bluff area, but you have the oil refinery in that area, Engen, and you had what we call the barracks. When I was there, we demolished that barracks and we moved the residents to another area. because they were living in appalling conditions in Tara Road. Now, perhaps you just want to give our listeners an indication, in that Bluff area, what's your constituency and what you cover, and how do you manage the situation there? You've got upmarket residents in the Bluff area and in parts of Merebank, in Treasure Beach, etc. And then you've got the low-cost housing in Osterville, etc. So perhaps you can give our listeners some kind of an indication which areas you covering in terms of the Bluff.
Okay, thanks. So the Bluff Ratepayers and Residents Association primarily focuses on Ward 66. So Ward 66 would encompass Grosvenor, Funlands, Ocean View, Brighton Beach, Treasure Beach.
All the upmarket areas.
It's an interesting phrase you use, upmarket. I think that the Bluff community is very much a middle class suburb at the moment. There's certainly we have what used to be referred to as Millionaire's Mile, namely Marine Drive, and there are some beautiful properties there. But unfortunately, what the city has allowed to happen around the Bluff has destroyed that property market, and that's just the reality of it. So we neighbour Ward 68, which encompasses Osterville and Merebank, and we certainly, since we've become involved with the Ratepayers Association, have tried to forge relationships with both Osterville and also Merebank. We can't, as RPAs, operate in silos.
Definitely.
The phrase I like to use is, we may not all be in the same boat, but we're certainly all in the same storm. And if we don't help one another, we're going to battle. And that was one when Alison and I started down this road almost 2 years ago now, what birthed ERPCO. We felt that there was really a need to form a body that all RPAs could join, that could then fight common causes and then leave the ratepayers within their own environments to take care of the things on the ground.
So what is emerging, and it's important you mentioned this, is that with the integration of the different race groups into the different areas, gone are the days of Osterville being a colored area, Merebank being an Indian area, Bluff being a white area. It's all integrated, and because of the integration, there are common issues. And I know in Osterville, there was a lot of environmental problems, and an individual by the name of Desmond Desar used to interact with us from there, but he used to deal with a host of issues. So I'm glad that later on in the program, we'll covering the type of deliverables you're concerned about. So Chaisa, I want you to come in now. You're the Secretary of Asherville Ratepayers Association.
Correct.
And you receive a lot of complaints in the chat group that comes through, because I see your comments coming through. What are the typical areas of concern that the ratepayers and residents are raising in that particular area that you are involved with?
So the majority, if you see the chats, has to do with water leaks and burst pipes. So I have a few dates just in September. It's actually shocking. So what happened at that time was they had changed the reservoir over from Sherwood. Not 100% sure which one feeds which, but they Sherwood 1, 2, and 3. So they were fixing one part of it, and they switched the reservoir over to feed us, so we're not impacted. But we were severely impacted. We had burst pipes on the 22nd. This is September 2024. On the 22nd of September, 23rd of September, 24th of September, 25th, 26th, 27th on the 1st and the 2nd of October. Can you believe it? And this has just not only impacted Asherville, it had impacted the entire of Ward 31 fed by the Sherwood Reservoir. So the feed had changed direction. Normally it's fed from the reservoir down Sparks Road and it feeds Ward 31. So when they switched reservoirs over, they started feeding through RD Naidu Road. And there, the infrastructure is just old. It hasn't been serviced or upgraded for years. There's just asbestos running right through it. So they would fix one part and plumbers are gone. They opened up the valves. Within a day, another half a meter down, it popped again. And it did that continuously through the entire of RD Naidu Road going onto Brickfield Road. Since then, they've changed the reservoir back to the flow, so it's flowing from Sparks Road. We've been okay, but we still have major leaks, all the time that happens. Brickfield Road needs a total upgrade.
Now tell me, is there any indication what is the cause of this? Is it poor workmanship or is it?
It's old infrastructure. Because every time whenever there's a major burst or whatever, I'm always on site to see what's happening, and you'd see the asbestos pipes being removed. The workmanship after that, maybe it's another half a meter down, it's bursting again. So possibly also part of that, but it's always just the asbestos that's still showing. Why we still have asbestos in our area, I'm not sure. I mean, that should have been removed like way long ago.
Ernest, I want to bring you in there.
Sure.
I know you're in the Water and Electricity Portfolio Committee. Now, I know there's two types of maintenance of the infrastructure. One is cyclical, which is, you'll provide a capital budget, and the other one is emergency maintenance, which is like burst water pipes, etc. Now, what Shaista as a ratepayer association bringing to our attention is that asbestos piping is still being used, and isn't that a health hazard, or is that the only form of piping, or can't they use other type of piping from a health point of view?
No, you see, the department's supposed to have this. Oh, sorry, should I say this is part of the replacement plan that they're supposed to have been carrying on for the last 30 years. The problem, what they've done, is not only has the department not received its full complement of funding, it receives enough to keep the unit going. It's limping along, as it were. In essence, you would need about 4.5 billion rand just to keep it running. But they don't receive their full complement. In order to achieve the goals that we've been pushing for, and exactly what you're mentioning, the asbestos pipe, and I can actually probably speak to why that, besides the fact that it's old, it's also on a decline as well. So as water flows, pressure builds, and that is why they actually have to have the valve to actually reduce the pressure the whole time in order to stop that kind of popping, is what they call it. The issue comes down to a simple planning problem, and when you have a problem with money to the most critical unit in the city, there will be a cascading effect. I agree that the planning that should have been done should have targeted on all main arterial routes and then all side roads after that. The problem with is that the planning people in either the unit, the municipality, the collective, whichever it is, don't seem to be putting a priority on it. I mean, now that we've got all these presidential working groups, maybe it's going to shake up the trio. But in terms of health, it's actually the new, there's a long name for it, but it's a long blue pipe that is actually being replaced for it, being replaced the old asbestos piping. But the plan was actually supposed to be removing that. And the goal every year is to, I think if I'm not mistaken, to remove about 350 kilometers every year, which is essentially 2% of the total volume or the total kilometerage of the whole grid that we have. So in order for us to get there over 25 years or 50 years, we've actually started hitting that 100% mark, and then it's repetitive. That problem, it hasn't happened in over 8-10 years, and that's where the problem is starting to come from. That is why a lot of our communities are turning around and saying, well, we need everybody, whatever association, a CEPF, Ratepayers Association, whichever association you belong to collectively put pressure on the municipality. Because not only is our health at risk, but it's also, are we getting our bang for our buck? That is the simple question people are saying. People want to put the prices up the whole time. We want to increase different tariffs all along the board, but we're not getting the services. So people are obviously feeling that they are not getting their bang for their buck.
So that's the purpose of the vibrant ratepayer associations. I want to spend the next 10 minutes with our guests in Pietermaritzburg. Anthony, you've been listening to our Durban ratepayers chatting, and the main issue they're talking about here, amongst other things, is burst water pipes, water leaks, electricity tariff increases. Perhaps you just want to give us a summary of the main issues of concern in Pietermaritzburg. I know you'll have a host of issues. Don't talk about potholes, because there are sinkholes in Pietermaritzburg, and the place is decayed so badly that words cannot describe. But perhaps you just want to highlight the main issues of concern. Whether you agree with our Durban colleagues here that water leakages is a major problem in Pietermaritzburg, electricity tariffs are too high, and the like, billing problems, etc. Anthony, Can you continue?
Yes, thanks. Well, if if I have to list the whole problems we have in Pietermaritzburg, we'll be here until tomorrow morning.
Most certainly.
So the major thing that we have here is that, as we are aware of, that our municipality has been administration for the past 3 times, and just recently for the past 5 years. So the challenge we have here is there's a lot of political interference in the municipality, especially when you have encadred employees that are actually appointed, that are incompetent and do not have the qualifications. And this is where the problem lies, is that you don't have managers that can actually run the actual departments. That's the one problem. The other issues as well too is that you don't have the systems in place, and also working under Pietermaritzburg at the moment is that there's no strategy to turn things around in our municipality. So you're working with incompetent people as well too, and what we find as well too is that there's also at the council level as well too, that you have in councillors that do not know how to use a computer. About 400, according to the KZN COGTA, 400 of your councillors do not know how to read and write. So I mean, that's where the problem is, and then they're actually having to manage the actual municipality. They are the buck stops with them. So that's the problem. Is one of the major problems is that, and then of course you have the many water and electricity outages as well too. Mostly water. You're having the municipality making their marketing, which is mostly on their Facebook page, on telling the residents to conserve the water. But I mean, we're having actual residents that actually phone in to actually report water leakages, and this water leakage has gone on for the past 5 years, and no one's been actually to deal with those water leakages. And the other challenge you have is that a large amount of the municipality departments do not have tools of the trade. For example, you have 20 plumbers, but they do tools of the trade. They don't have transport to get into actually to the water leak. So these are the major problems we have with our municipality. And as the thing is that it was mentioned as well too, that the whole system of local government is actually dysfunctional. And what needs to be done, we need to actually revisit the actual system, the new model of local government. And I think there again, we need to actually have people that understand local government. I mean, for example, myself, I'm busy doing a 3-year diploma in local government management, and what I'm learning and in theory has not been implemented practically. So there is the problem there as well too. People do not understand how local government works, and it's important that we actually have a grasp on how things work and manage things properly and accountable amongst ourselves as well too, from residents as well as to the politicians as well and the officials.
So Anthony,
Thanks.
what you're mentioning is there's very little you could talk about that's positive in Msunduzi. Much of it is a problem there.
Yes, I mean what we do there's positiveness where you have in residents actually doing the work of the municipality. You're finding that residents are actually cleaning the verges, fixing potholes, and I just mentioned about tools of the trade. I mean, you're having residents having to provide parts when they're coming to repair the pipes, that you having residents having to provide parts for the actual piping that's needing to be repaired. We speak about the actual all the time when the municipality or the officials, especially the mayor and deputy mayor, that actually makes a reference to the actual poor infrastructure and maintenance of infrastructure. The challenge we have there again is that small percentage of the budget is allocated towards upgrades and maintenance of infrastructure, and we should be looking at actually having about 8% of the budget going towards maintenance and repairs. So this is also the challenge we have here, is that they're not prioritizing the actual funding to the right areas of need. I mean, you have the mayor that's been campaigning for 27 million rand towards Royal AM Royal AM Football Club. I mean, that's outrageous. I mean, why must we actually pay for that?
Okay. And I just want to ask Kanta to come in. You want to add to what Anthony has mentioned, or the other issues of concern that you want to raise?
No, I would echo the same sentiments of Anthony. But in addition to that, it baffles me that we have exorbitant tariff increases for water, electricity, but how much of that is earmarked towards upgrading those infrastructure? In particular, Pietermaritzburg has an MCB charge. We're one of the very few municipalities that have that. And we were advised that that would have been a once-off charge, but it isn't. And residents are constantly fighting with the municipality as to why this is being charged to them. In addition, the speaker spoke earlier on regarding the burst pipes. In Limpopo alone, and I've said this to our mayor, it's a miracle, actually, if we have water and electricity at the same time because of the same particular issue. And it's a gripe of mine that they would come through, they would dig up, repair that leak, and don't fill up and repair that road again, especially if they've dug in front of someone's yard. And then it's for a private resident to have to attend to it themselves at their cost. In addition, those water outages or those electricity outages, one would think that there'd be a difference in your bill because you've been without water and electricity for so long, but you don't see a difference in your bill. Apart from that, to get the water truck to come out to give you water is such a mission. I've personally experienced, just a few weeks ago in our particular area, we didn't have water. We begged a private company to bring out a water tanker, and that tanker had to leave at 5. Those residents that finished work and came home had no water for days. So, I can echo the rest of the speakers when they say, this issue is getting out of hand. It's reactive mentality instead of proactive mentality. It doesn't make sense 30 years after democracy that we should be behaving this way.
Okay, thank you, Kanta. And what we'll do now is I want to pose a question which I'll expect, our ratepayer associations to comment on after the news break, which we're going to take shortly. Are municipal officials personally liable for unauthorized or irregular expenditure or for non-performance? Now, I've heard clearly that the problem lies with the politicians and the officials. On 15 November 2024, the Supreme Court of Appeal recently had to consider the question and the provision of Section 32 of the Municipal Finance Management Act, MFMA, and the provisions of Section 172(1) of the Constitution in a judgment delivered on 8 November 2024 in a particular case in the Nelson Mandela municipality. The court held that Section 32 on its plain wording rendered municipal officials statutorily liable for unauthorized, irregular or fruitless and wasteful expenditure in addition to any liability under common law or any other legislation. The court also observed that this would not be limited to municipal officials but could be extended to political office bearers who are not involved in the day-to-day running of the municipality. The court also remarked that the plain wording of Section 32 makes it clear that the recovery of such expenditure is not optional. The municipality is obliged to recover such expenditure from the person liable for it. So that's quite a serious court order. We'll chat briefly about it and because we're looking at a way forward. So what we do is we'll have a short break and let's think about comments on this court judgment.
The Al-Ansar Foundation, Dawah, Tarbiyah and Education, establishing the foundations of Islamic civilization in South Africa. An informative Islamic global perspective. This is Al-Ansar News.
30th of November, the news from Durban 90.4 FM, Pietermaritzburg 105.6 FM. A search is on for missing teenager at Ann Stays Beach, America Monina. A search is underway for a teenager presumed to have drowned at Anstey's Beach on the Bluff in Durban. According to Life Saving South Africa, the teenager was swimming with a group of friends yesterday, despite the beach being closed due to high level of E. coli. It says that the 18-year-old was swept out to sea during the tail end of the spring high tide cycle. The Life-Saving SA has again urged people only to swim when and where lifeguards are on duty. At the weekend, authorities responded to 2 separate fatal drownings on the south coast. More news now. A manhunt is underway for a group of suspects behind a triple murder in Ntuzuma. Authorities say the gunmen entered a house in Newtown last night, killing 3 men and injuring 1. KwaZulu-Natal police spokesperson Robert Nechwanda says detectives are looking into the motive behind the attack. Still with KwaZulu-Natal, labor exploitation and the construction mafia are at the top of the agenda at the inaugural National Construction Summit in KwaZulu-Natal. Deputy Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Sihle Zigalala, emphasized the level of worker exploitation in the sector, describing it as akin to modern-day slavery.
We also want transformation in the industry. Transformation against big companies that are colluding, as we saw during the 2010. We also want transformation wherein professionals will be able to register, unlike what has been happening over years, where associations and councils have employed regulations that constrain the registration of Black people, in particular women. The industry remains dominated by old people, white and male. We must transform that situation, ensure that the industry reflects the demographics of our country.
In more news now, mining experts and community leaders have been drafted to find a solution to the impasse between law enforcement and illegal miners underground at an abandoned mine in Stilfontein. Rescue workers are assessing the safety of the mine shaft, and cameras will be deployed to confirm the number of illegal miners who are still underground. Police is insisting that they will apprehend those illegal miners as soon as they resurface. Kopano Konopi is of Kosat of the Northwest, is wading in on government's conduct on the Stilfontein underground crisis.
There might be some criminality that is happening here, but that does not mean that there must be abundance and living in this area. What is disturbing is what we just got to know now, to say, of all the people who have surfaced from the mine, none of them has been charged with contravention of the Mining Act. All of them, they've been charging with Immigration Act, and all South Africans have just been released on Woni without any charges that have been placed on. So if there's this element of criminality, why are we not seeing people being charged on the contravention of the Mining Act? And we see them going to appear in court. Yes, there's a criminality, but they are condoning criminality because they are not charging anybody.
In other news, President Cyril Ramaphosa has invited U.S. President-elect Donald Trump for a state visit to South Africa. He confirmed the invitation during an engagement with the media following the conclusion of the G20 summit in Brazil. Brazil has officially handed over the G20 presidency to South Africa, with the country's term set to start on the 1st of December. The country will now host the G20 Leaders Summit in 2025. Ramaphosa says he would work closely with Trump after he moves into the White House in January, as he would with many other leaders. And finally, tens of thousands of Palestinians are at risk of starvation and deadly thirst in the northern Gaza Strip amid Israel's devastating siege and bombing of the area. Earlier yesterday, the Palestinian Civil Defense said more than 70,000 people are currently at risk of starvation if they survive regime's intense bombardment of Palestinian towns in northern Gaza. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs also confirmed that over 65,000 people are suffering inhumane conditions in the northern towns of the Gaza Strip. In your weather, it's 29 degrees. A quick reminder of our top story: a search is underway for a teenager presumed to have drowned at Anstey's Beach on the Bluff in Durban. That's the news.
Black November is here with unbeatable savings from Simplex Radio.
Save 500 Rand on the Kenwood home mixer, now just 1799.
The D5 4.7-litre air fryer is only 799, saving you 400 Rand.
Philips irons starting at just 299 Rand.
Plus save 300 Rand on the Midea 20-litre microwave, now only 799 Rand.
Don't wait. These incredible deals won't last long.
Simplex Radio, the name you can trust.
Butterlicious, butterlicious, butterlicious. When the food melts in my mouth, so does my heart. Blended by our expert chefs with pure cotton seed oil. Divine lasts longer, so cook more with Divine. Divine makes every meal a special treat. It is Butterlicious. Approved as part of the Heart and Stroke Foundation Eating Plan, Cotton Mark SA, and a proudly South African product. Divine Cooking Oil. Butterlicious.
Are you tired of working from home? The Al Ansar Delhi is excited to introduce its new co-working space, perfect for remote workers to meet and network. Enjoy a productive work environment, high-speed Wi-Fi, and delicious food and drinks at your fingertips. Al Ansar Delhi co-working space, where work meets flavor.
Would you like to give Sadaqah 365 days a year? You can with the Al Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
This Black November, we promise you the best prices in town. From LG, get the 42-litre microwave oven for 2699, saving you 650 Rand. With a side-by-side fridge freezer at 16,999, save 5,000 Rand. Also available is the 13 kg top loader at 6499, saving 1,500.
Wawas, where shopping is fun. And you are number one.
Join Huda SA as we raise funds to complete phase 2 of the finishes of the Ilovo Masjid construction. We humbly request your generous Sadaqah Ejariya and Lillah donations. Your contribution helps build a masjid and earn everlasting rewards. For more information, contact Huda SA on 031 271 3049 or visit www.huda-int.org. Act now and earn your share of sawab. Donate today. Huda SA, building communities, strengthening faith.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto, your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport.
Kenfield Auto.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين.
Car won't start?
Kenfield Auto.
Noisy brakes?
Kenfield Auto.
Due for a service?
Kenfield Auto.
Kenfield Auto, the answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto.
The Al Ansar Foundation, Da'wah, Tarbiyah and Education, establishing the foundations of Islamic civilization in South Africa.
Radio Al Ansar, Durban 90.4 FM, Pietermaritzburg 105.6 FM.
وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين. And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the world. उठो बेसहारो चलो गम के मारो खबर ये सुनाओ हुजूर आ गए हैं 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 हुजूर आ गए हुजूर आ गए हुजूर आ गए हुजूर आ गए अनोखा निराला वो ज़ीशान आया वो सारे रसूलों का सुल्तान आया अरे बादशाह हो अरे कज गुला हो निगाहें झुकाओ हुजूर आ गए 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 हुआ चार सूर है उम्मतों का बसेरा उजाला उजाला सवेरा 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 हलीमा को पहुंची खबर आमिना की मेरे घर में आओ हुजूर आ गए हैं हुजूर आ गए हुजूर आ गए हुजूर आ गए
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Mansberg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. I mentioned that the show is interactive and we welcome your comments, which can be sent to us on the studio WhatsApp number 0600-904-1056. Just before the news break, we had quite a vibrant chat with the ratepayer associations in Durban and Pietermaritzburg. Indications are that ratepayers in the main are unanimously concerned about the poor state of service delivery throughout the country. Indications are that it's at its all-time low throughout the different provinces and something needs to be done. Ratepayers are banking on the fact that 2026 elections are about a year and a half away and they're hoping that they can mobilize and bring political change. But with that, you need to ensure that the officials are brought to account. Before the news break, I read out a court decision from the Supreme Court of Appeal, wherein the court held a section, in terms of Section 32, they render municipal officials statutory liable for unauthorized, irregular, or fruitless and wasteful expenditure, in addition to any liability under common law, including political officials as well. Now, it'll be interesting to note that consequential management must become a prerogative because the delivery arm in most municipalities are the officials, starting from the city manager to the deputy city managers, to the heads of departments, to the deputy heads, to the managers, and they get jolly well paid, these officials. They get market-related salaries. And when I interviewed the mayor last year sometime of eThekwini municipality, Mr. Kaunda, he openly mentioned, and he wasn't afraid to say so, and I've repeated this several times, that his observation together with some of his EXCO members was that in eThekwini, and this would likely apply to other municipalities, that municipal officials from senior to middle management are coming in the morning, signing the registers, disappearing for the day, returning in the afternoons and signing off as though they were there for the entire day. And this is a bad example to other officials, and this is one of the serious reasons why service delivery is at its all-time low. That is one concern. The other concern is that incompetent officials are being put into senior positions, and I think, Anthony has alluded to the fact that this cadre deployment is becoming a huge problem. And then corruption, maladministration, and the like is not being attended to timeously, and officials are not taken to task. They're not being disciplined. They're not being charged. So this court ruling, I think council and the executive committee of municipalities have to take this seriously and set a few examples. But the question that we like to raise, and this is going to come up in our discussion, is it came up last week when I had other ratepayer associations, that how do we bring about a change to improve service delivery? I mentioned at the start that the president was concerned about the whole issue of some intervention in local authorities, because that is the ground of service delivery. And the president admitted himself that because they did not sharp focus on the functioning and performance of municipalities, that this cost them, a lot in terms of votes during the provincial and national elections, because the people lost confidence. And then you had the emergence of breakaway political groupings within the ruling party. We know that MK, formed its own party, midway through the election period or during the course of the start of the elections. And in KZN, they drew the majority of support from citizens. So they worried that this could likely happen during municipal elections. But other political parties and civic associations are now looking at this whole aspect seriously, because the question that arises, you voted these politicians into power, and they are appointing officials that are complicit with them because they obviously listen to them, and that's where the problem lies. Because if you have incompetent officials, then obviously the work is not going to be done. Because if they're not in the office, then certainly, they're not. If in the finance department you have, individuals that are holding senior positions that do not understand municipal finances and don't have the necessary skills and qualifications, then you're going to have a crisis in the billing section. So obviously, those are some of the areas we need to look back. But I want to bring you in, Ernest, before I sort of ask the ratepayer associations to comment again. This court judgment, will eThekwini start implementing? And number one, holding officials accountable for maladministration, because CIRU has reported many cases in the last 12 to 18 months, and there's been very little or no actions, and those officials are still there, not being taken action.
Yeah, you know what? I'll be quite honest. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place with this one, simply because if you look at the Section 154 that obviously Sutcliffe has been leading along, and with the technical report that was released and what issues that were raised, one of them was effective accountability, transparency, the failure to engage with communities, and a whole vast array of other things. The process then followed to where there was a request to the municipality for various information on this, and I think at that stage only 40% had been supplied, and there was an outright refusal by the city manager, if I'm not mistaken. So, and when the municipality responded to the query to say, well, no, we haven't initiated or begun that process. So it's a very difficult question to answer, and I'll go right back to the issue. It comes down to political will. The reality is that ANC knows it's in trouble. It knows that its officials are in trouble, because if they don't start doing the job that they have got through the back door, and I emphasize the point, not all officials are like that. Not everybody was appointed through the back door. And these officials that are complicit, that need to be held accountable, that need to be shown the boot or fired, whichever analogy you want to use. The reality is they are worried, because when we start putting pressure on, and this is to the credit of not only ourselves, but the various associations, when we start putting the pressure on to say, you're appointed there to do a job, not to be a pseudo politician. And the reality of it is they are struggling because their comrades are demanding that they account to what they want. But equally so, we as a collective are putting the pressure on to say, no, you have a job to do and you need to do it. If you're not competent, get out. And that's what needs to be done. And I think the officials from the city manager down are in a hard place, because they need to start showing that they're actually getting rid of the rot. But it's difficult when it starts all the way at the top.
Dr. Annie, I want to bring you in here. I know that you're frustrated as a ratepayer association in that when issues are being raised, it's taking time to resolve these issues. If a burst water pipe emerges, then they are embarrassed and they will send somebody to repair the pipe. And as Shesta mentioned, a couple of days later, down the road, that pipe is burst again and pressure has dropped as well. You have a situation where no action is being taken for poor performance. Ernest, I know that there is what we call performance management agreements signed by all senior officials.
Mm-hmm.
And there's bonuses being given towards the end of the year, saying that they performed and they deserve a bonus in addition to the 13 checks. So, which means that more and more payments are being made for inefficiencies, but we'll discuss that on another occasion. From your perspective, Dr. Annie, you raised some key issues where you mentioned that there's consistent water leaks, water outages, electricity outages. At least we're glad that this load shedding has been, of the past in the last
What a
12
blessing.
to 15 months. But, there was some trick that was used to keep electricity away from us during that period. Be that as it may, that would have worsened the situation further. But you've got other basic deliverables which are critical and not being attended to. For example, the potholes, the stormwater blockages, the verges not being cut timeously. I know later on I'm going to ask you, is there any deliverables at all? And you may say yes. Has there been any impact in your playing an oversight role? Then definitely there is some impact. But you may want to comment that the frustration on the part of your ratepayers and residents, how they are looking at it. Do they believe they're not getting value for money in terms of the rates they're paying and the utilities they pay?
Mr. Sekur, I think that the sentiment across the board is that people are generally not happy. So I think that I know that I don't just speak for the residents in my area, but across the board, I think that residents and ratepayers are not very happy with the services that they're getting, with the fact that they're paying their rates, they're not getting their water. There's water outages, there's power cuts, there's power outages, and a lot of it has to do, in many instances, we know that we're no longer dealing with the schedule where people can plan in accordance with that. But I think that a lot of it has to do with what has already been identified. And his name has emerged on a number of occasions during the course of this evening. So I think that I'm also going to have to refer to Dr. Mike Sutcliffe. Dr. Mike Sutcliffe, at the time that he was the mayor,
no, city manager.
The city manager.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the
Promoted him there.
City manager of eThekwini. The eThekwini area was identified as one of the best in the world, and the way it was run. So the question is, what has happened from that time to where we are at this point in time? And in terms of his report, what Dr. Sutcliffe identified was that with regard to implementation, the reason that we are in crisis is because he identified the following: that leadership has to show responsiveness, has to show transparency, and with regard to tenders, etc., that must be published. One has to know who those tenders go to, what has been paid, what hasn't been paid, and basically there needs to be accountability. I think that the key word or the key phrase here being accountability. So when we're dealing with these officials and when our ratepayers come to us and are unhappy with the burst pipes, are unhappy with the fact that, they're having difficulties with the electricity, etc., or, it has stopped for reasons that are not foreseeable and shouldn't be the case, and then there are issues with that and frustration, obviously, is that a lot of it has to do with, and there's just that one word, Mr. Sekur, and that's accountability. In the corporate world, at institutions, there's performance management. So the question is, how effective is performance management when it comes to the eThekwini municipality? And that is the question. With every turn one takes in a work environment, the question is, you've got to deliver. You got to make sure that you set out to achieve your targets. And if you don't, then obviously you're underperforming. So the question is that being done effectively? Because when we look at the stats, as ratepayers, I think we're always looking at the stats and what's the budget for the next year, 2025, 2026. And we see this escalating, okay? And the question is, people are not happy with it. Bonuses are always on the increase, and people are unhappy. Residents are unhappy. They're frustrated because of the fact that it impacts on them. So I think that many people would like to see this through, would like to ensure that there are proper structures in place, would like to ensure that one can see that people are held accountable, because it seems that a lot is just slipping through, and that is quite, it's quite a sad state of affairs. I want to go back to the case and just make reference to the question that you've been asking, and you have asked other panelists. And the decision with regard to the Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality has to be endorsed. If you look at the amounts that are at stake there, which runs into it's a good few millions. I think that if you look at basically the implementation of the act that we are referring to specifically there in that instance, which is the Local Government Municipal Finance Management Act of 2003, I think what we're able to see there is the actual implementation. And as a result of that, the court reaches the finding or gets to the outcome. And, I think that a lot of people were absolutely elated at that decision, because it's a precedent. It's something that we can refer to. And we know that now public officials, municipal officials, can be held accountable. And if you ask me the question about how I feel about it, there's a resounding yes in terms of implementation, because we can hold municipal and local officials accountable. We look at this on a daily basis. We look around at these officials. We know who they are. We're engaging with them all the time. Mr. Sakur, we write to them. We write to them tirelessly to address issues, and nothing gets done. So the question is, the buck has to stop with somebody. There has to be accountability. When we look at the relevant legislation in place, for example, the Local Government Municipal Systems Act, the Local Government Municipal Structures Act, and this case which refers to the Local Government Municipal Finance Management Act, one was always very critical because they are so well articulated. That is something that I have to give the municipality a big plus for. The manner in which they articulated is absolutely exemplary, and I'm talking about it very critically. As an expert in statutory legislation and constitutional interpretation, it's solid, but it is a question of implementation. And I think when you look at it and you look at the outcome of this decision, I think that there's no ambivalence here. We totally in support of the decision and the outcome and the finding. I like to put it out there that I am an eternal optimist, and we would like to see this further implemented so that more people can be held accountable, because we know that there's some people that are just getting away with murder, so to speak. I just want to also indicate that if there's any way we're going to succeed at this as ratepayers and as frustrated residents, it is through using these structures. We've got to be able to use the structures. I like the idea that there's going to be further engagement, because I think that as ratepayers, we need to have total input in terms of the structures and in terms of how we want to see this process carried through and followed through.
Thanks, Annie, for bringing up some very pertinent comments. But I want to bring in our finance guru, our economist, our asset manager, Hassan Mutala. Hassan, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. Hassan, you've been listening patiently to this court ruling on holding officials personally accountable for wasteful and fruitful expenditure. Last week, you spoke about the Auditor General and some of the qualified reports in majority of the municipalities that he's formulated. Yeah. Now, this is a court ruling, and it could set the scene for holding officials and politicians accountable for wasteful and fruitless expenditure, because this is across the spectrum of the country. Perhaps you want to comment on this court decision and how do we implement?
Sure. I think firstly, it's good to have it's finally we are seeing something that is happening. And besides the court ruling, you have seen over the last couple of months various parts of government that are trying to implement and introduce measures to stop this. So, for example, you had National Treasury recently talking about that they're going to be closing the taps in terms of funding for municipalities that are not paying their bills. So firstly, whether firstly you're talking about individuals, but then you talk about municipalities. It's obviously a rot that's across the system. Now, municipalities are owing huge amounts of money to various institutions. ESCOM, for example, we talked about last week, owed 90 billion. Their debt from municipalities increased from 2.6 billion 10 years ago to 90 billion currently. That's a massive amount.
Is that countrywide?
That's countrywide. Then you've got municipalities owing water boards in South Africa 23 billion rands. Again, massive amount. More than 70% of this debt is about 4 months overdue. So again, the culture of non-payment that has continued for a long period of time. What Treasury is saying now, Treasury is allowed in many instances to disburse funds to various municipalities. So, for example, there's 5 municipalities highlighted. I'll mention them as well. There's Mashabeng, Kopanong, Tabazimbi, Merafang City, and Victor Kanye. These municipalities alone, to give you an example, the Mashabeng and Kopanong owe Vaal Central Water Board just under 8 billion rands. That's massive. If you look at Merafang City and Victor Kanye, or the Rand Water Board, around 1.5 billion rands. Huge amounts of money. So what Treasury is saying, hold on, we have to give you guys, the 5 municipalities, on the 4th of December, 483 million. And in March, we have to give you another 360. We're not going to give you that. Until you start paying what is owed to the various water boards, then we will start dispersing you money.
Now, I just want to pause there because our listeners are hearing these figures. Our ratepayer associations are hearing these figures. There's a ricochet effect. So you have a situation where there's underground water leaks, there's non-payment of bills by the residents, and the municipalities are not paying the sort of water boards and the electricity boards. Now, a lot of that may be being paid to the municipalities is also being squandered as fruitless expenditure because of maladministration and corruption.
Yes.
So there's a ricochet effect and the multiple reasons why this is happening. Now, in order to curtail and respond to what Alison was mentioning, that more than 50% of our residents are living below the poverty line, and they battling to eke out a living. And I mentioned it's food or electricity. That's what the pensioners are saying, because they're earning just over $2,000 a month. So the country now is being mismanaged from a local government level in the majority local governments in the country. So you now quoting these stats, obviously it sort of impacts from the bottom to the top. Perhaps you just want to give a comment on that. So,
Sure.
Because this will be linked up to this court case that we're going to start now holding officials and politicians accountable.
There's a couple of key things. So firstly, if you look at who pays, firstly, taxes in terms of, firstly, whether it's income tax, particularly income tax, and then also looking at rates paid through the country. If you look at the middle to upper income, and even the many of the other suburbs, low income, there is a fair amount of money that's been paid. However, the historical black townships, and there is still a culture of non-payment in many of them. And you'll see a lot of the large debt that is owed to the likes of ESCOM do still emanate in many of those townships. That's fact. And
So
that's
there's a culture
that's
of non-payment with
a
no
culture of
consequences.
So remember, prior when the apartheid years, it was encouraged to do that. That was a form of sort of resistance, and there was a form of basically going against the apartheid government. Post 1994, and as we moved on, there was obviously an intention to start collecting, paying, and improving the various suburbs and the like, and we had that. If you look at 1994 through to 2008, there was substantial improvement in many suburbs across the country. You had an improvement in electricity supply. You had an improvement in terms of supply of drinking water across the country. You had an improvement in various other forms of services that was provided to it. There was an actual improvement. However, the Zuma era from 2008-9 onwards, right through to the first term of the current president as well, but particularly the Zuma era. The Zuma era destroyed many of the good foundation that had been laid in the prior 15 years before that, 14 years before that. That was an issue. The second big issue, and I come back to and it's reiterated by many of the colleagues in the room here, the cadre deployment and the issues around skills is the biggest issue. Yunus, you were part of the municipality. There were many others like you as well in the various municipalities across the country that were forced to, either the way they had to take retirement because of a certain age, but also many of them were just given early retirement packages and moved on. The problem, what happened after that, was the skills that came in was non-existent. You had terrible skills that came into municipalities. And secondly, they loaded those municipalities with more admin-intensive type of people. Firstly, they didn't really have skills. They were just there filling bums on seats, and they were getting paid a fat sum to do that. The problem with that is the expenditure bill, the wage bill across municipalities, across state and institutions has become so large that the ratepayers' money that is being paid is being used towards mainly the wage bills. And the problem is a small part is going towards maintenance and infrastructure. That's the big issue. The big issue is if you look at 15 years ago, 16 years ago.
And some portion of that is going towards maladministration.
There's a huge amount. I mean, we've already talked about a few months ago when the AG, Auditor General, came out with the report and highlighted 70% of municipalities in the country have a qualified audit report. That means they can't qualify, they can't say it's honest and fair, whatever, because there's so much of wasteless and fruitless expenditure that they can't really talk. So that is the issue. Now, I'll give you an example. So if you look at the budget, and this is also within the public sector of government and the like, it's across the board. The thing is, when you have such a big amount just going towards wages, and when you're paying people that are inefficient, unproductive, what's the point?
Not only wages, bonuses that Annie was talking about.
Besides bonuses, many of them are getting kickbacks by somebody that they know that they basically is now got this tender or that tender. They're getting a bag of money.
The time they're not in the offices, they're cutting deals.
They're cutting deals. That's the unfortunate nature of that. Is that but the fact of the matter is, a big part of the budget is going towards paying them. You need to remove them. Yeah. To do that is very hard because of politics. Politics, unfortunately, plays a massive part in it.
Because of the council that's in place and the
council,
administrators that are
and
there.
then it depends on who has the number of votes and who can sway the decisions in a certain favor. And then there's always going to be horse trading that takes place, and somehow or the other, some people continue to stay. That's unfortunate. But we're fortunate, at least in KZN, we've had slowly some changes. You've got a new mayor, you've got a new police commissioner who I rate. I think he's a fantastic. He's doing a very good job in the last couple of months. Slowly, I think there are changes. But the fact of the matter is, in major municipalities, in terms of and other institutions, whether it's Home Affairs, whether it's the water board, wherever it is, the fact is there's a lack of skills. A good thing would be to try and you're seeing it happen in ESCOM, you're seeing it in other places. They're actually trying to bring back some of the older guys to get some of the skills back in. You need that. You need the skills. Once you get the skills back in, hire them and let them train some of the younger guys and the inexperienced guys that are there so that you can actually upskill and get a better workforce. That's one thing. The second thing is debt. We've got a big issue of debt in this country, across municipalities, across institutions. It's a big issue. And the problem is 20% of the budget is going towards debt servicing costs. So when you got debt servicing costs of 20%, another 40% is going towards your wage bill. How much is being left towards infrastructure and maintenance? Very little. That's why you drive around Crescent Street, you drive around Randall's Road, you drive around, it's either potholes or sinkholes, water leaks every second week. There's massive water leaks. That means you're running out. because 50% of the water that's being pumped is lost through the system and you're not being billed on it. That's an issue. So you need to, whether we'll get there or not, I think we'll get there. I think it will take time, but there'll be some improvement. But it's going to be public and private partnerships. That's going to help that. Eskom is an example of that. Eskom was in an absolute mess 12 months back. But the corporate sector and the private sector has spent a huge amount of money in terms of putting in solar, alternative energy and the like. With the result, the impact or pressure on the grids has reduced. So it's not fantastic work being done by Eskom. Eskom slowly has actually improved in terms of efficiency and slowly in terms of maintenance. But the benefit has been that the big part of households, not big part of, but I mean a fair amount of households, but a big part of the private sector has put in their own resources in terms of energy generation, and that has helped. So I think if you see that coming in the water infrastructure, you see that happening in terms of the roads, the ports, the railways, that will help. And I think there is a move towards that, and hopefully we'll see some improvement there.
Okay, Norman, I want to bring you in. I don't want to put you off to sleep also. You've heard our economists talking. I heard Dr. Annie Singh talking about Dr. Mike Sutcliffe and why was the situation different from then. If I get some time, I'll answer it because I was in that landscape during that period and I know what he did to improve service delivery. Our economists mentioned that there's non-revenue water, non-revenue electricity because residents in various certain areas are not paying. Now, in an area close to where you live, known as Amlazi, there are 2 or 3 huge hostels in that area. And those hostels, it cost approximately 450 million of operating expenditure to take care of those hostels, and there's virtually no payment for electricity and water, and there's no disconnection of electricity and water. Mm-hmm. Now, non-revenue expenditure incurred in the townships is becoming the order of the day, and you will concede why the municipality is not taking any action, because that's their voter base, and that's the reality. Now, I'm not sure, I mean, you mentioned Bluff now was an upmarket area, Marine Drive, etc. Now it's back to more or less, but it's an integrated area. Perhaps you want to comment on the South Durban, and Alison will probably come in there, as to how do we deal with these non-revenue users of utilities. And Ernest might want to come in later because I know that a lot of councillors are sharp focusing in, but it's being hidden from council, this non-revenue expenditure. Because Ernest, I'm not sure whether he's hearing it the first time from me, but if he goes and check it out, that figure I gave him might be much higher.
A lot more.
Your comments, Norman?
So it's an interesting question, but it's a unique problem because there is non-revenue service supply, but also there's a reality that water is life and sanitation is dignity. So you can't just take that away from people because they can't afford to pay for it. But the city needs to manage its resources better. So you raised the issue earlier about the water curtailment issues, because we are exceeding our supply from Mngeni by approximately 200 million litres a day. But we lose almost 500 million litres a day through water leaks. If the city could just take care of 20% of the water we lose through broken and damaged infrastructure, we don't have a problem with our water supply from Mngeni. The reason why we're feeling the pinch of non-revenue services is because the infrastructure is so bad. So they need to get money from somewhere. The problem is the measures that the city wants to put in place, you're penalizing the people who are paying for the services. So if you're going to curtail water and you're going to put restrictors into taps and things, put them in the taps of the people who are not paying for their water. Because if you're not paying that bill, you don't think twice about leaving the tap open when you filled your bucket and you walk away. But when you have to pay your bill, as a lot of the people do sitting around this table, we make sure that we don't waste water. We don't leave taps running. We look after the resources that are available to us. So that's the key issue. You know, it's how do you get people to pay? You know, when it comes to the hostels and those sort of things, you know, those people have never paid for services.
No,
But there comes a time with every society where everybody has to chip in and start paying. And there's no reason why they should just be left alone. But we know, and as Ernest has mentioned a couple of times, is political will. Political will is an amazing thing. You see, when you need to achieve a goal, you will move mountains. But when you realize that what is required to do is going to be harmful to your future prospects, you tend to let things slide and brush them
now,
under the
our
carpet.
economist has mentioned that the funds coming in from your rate and tax base. Alison, I want to bring you in now. You're in that South Durban area, and that's now getting shrinked considerably. And you have a situation where not only the hostels, there's 10 of them in eThekwini, Ernest.
Yeah.
Ask me the details there. There's 10. It's costing 440 million, equivalent to 4% rates. It must be much higher. I'm talking about when I was there, what's the situation? Those councillors can't hide it from us. I'm not going to refer to the informal settlements. There's over 600 of them. There's over 200,000 families. They're getting free electricity and water as well. And that's non-revenue. Now in the South Basin, you know, you'll have that bridge that's fallen out and it's causing chaos. What is your view as a ratepayer association to deal with the crises in the South Basin in terms of what I'm saying? Because you have a lot of informal settlements. You have a lot of townships in that area that, you know, in the south of Durban and in your area as well. How do you think that the city should be addressing non-revenue in those areas? Because it's impacting, as our economist said, on the cost of electricity and water and the rates hikes.
So in my ideal world, and if I could wave a magic wand, I would change the whole model at local government, remove politicians completely from the mix and make the municipalities purely service delivery driven institution based on performance delivery. And if you don't perform, you're out. I think that would actually solve a lot of our problems. But in terms of addressing the non-revenue specifically, we've got this magical thing called prepaid. Now, not just the water that's being lost, a large portion of properties do not have any meters at all. And that is a political decision that was made to garner votes. A lot of those properties, and I won't mention the owners of the properties, but a lot of those properties have been developed, and some of those properties are actually in a far better condition than some Umhlanga properties, yet they are not metered. Now, how can that be possible? You know, that is not fair. Our legislation requires, our constitution requires that service delivery must be equal across the board, but yet we are living in the most unequal period I've ever seen. So I think firstly, in terms of the constitution, there has been a constitutional contravention that service delivery is not being applied equally. It needs to be applied equally. You can't walk into a shop and take a loaf of bread because times are tough and say, I'm not going to pay for this because I'm entitled to it. You are consuming, it's costing the city, it's costing the country, and you need to pay for it. Maybe not the same tariff to compensate for some previously disadvantaged, but only if you start paying for it will you value it. When you value it, you won't squander it. And that is where the mindset needs to change.
Some good suggestions. I want to get back to my brothers and sisters in PM Berg because they've been listening for quite a while. Anthony, I know in PM Berg you've got similar problems because some of the areas that are the poor areas in Pietermaritzburg is that Northdale, Raystop, Sobantu Village, Princesla, even Lincoln Mead, etc. And you've got a whole lot of informal settlements there. Now, non-revenue water and electricity, perhaps you want to comment on the situation in PM Berg. Is it similar to Durban and also the problems are of a similar nature, Anthony? Anthony, are you online with us? we lost connection with Maritzburg?
No,
We can hear you.
we can hear you.
Now we can hear you, Anthony. Go ahead. You heard
Okay.
my question.
Yes.
Okay, go
well,
for it, Anthony.
Yeah, we do have a similar problems that was mentioned, which is across the board, yeah, in Pietermaritzburg, and you have a large amount of informal settlements that are not properly managed by the municipality. I mean, we can just take, for example, there's an informal settlement called Jika Joe, where there is actually they have tried to improve it with the actual the building of flats, but the challenge there was that the flats that were built there was a corrupt element there, because the buildings that were built there, the actual flats were not properly built, and you can see the damage that has been caused just recently. I mean, quite brand new building that was developed there. So these are the challenge we have, that a large amount of informal settlements do not actually, as it was mentioned, that there's no the systems that are not being implemented in your townships. For example, a large amount of the townships do not have street names, and how do you get account to a person that is staying in a street, for example? So these are the issues that we actually wanting to highlight, that there needs to be actually ways of actually uplifting the township areas, especially, and they're actually been completely neglected by the municipalities. And I think we need to do a lot of work into upliftment of the township areas. And I think the right person to speak about that, who actually lives in the townships, is Madoda. He can actually speak to that, because he actually lives in Mbali, and the lived experience that they're experiencing, he will actually have a much more perspective and actually giving what actually transpires and what the experiences are in the townships.
Madoda, perhaps you want to come in. I know you from the Mbali Residents Association. Some of our ratepayer officials that are present here indicated that they don't have a problem, because the areas that were disadvantaged in the past, there may be very poor people living there, and the tariffs may not be affordable. And obviously, the city need to look at, how do they work out assisting those people. But at the end of the day, the reason why the city is not being able to balance its books is that there's non-revenue expenditure being incurred, and that is impacting. And in addition, you have, maladministration and corruption, because if those issues were dealt with appropriately, then the funds that was available for service delivery would improve service delivery. Perhaps you want to comment, Madoda?
Thank you very much for giving me the time. Yes, you are right in quite a number of the reasons that you've put forward. However, I think there's also another assumption that us as ratepayers in the townships don't pay. What we actually experience in the township is a lot of corruption, a lot of maladministration. Just making an example, since you mentioned me, I live in the township. I have an issue where we have a billing issue, where you're sitting with us that actually pay the rates that have been double billed for over almost 20 years. I personally am sitting with almost 189,000 Rand in terms of bills that I don't know where they came about. So the issues that we've also outlined within the township is also coming from our municipality, where our municipality doesn't actually do their job. So making an example, in the townships, you'll find that there are people that go out and work. And during the times where the meters are supposed to be read and accurate readings are supposed to be recorded within the rates, that is not done. So you'll find your ESCOM and you'll find your municipality workers using estimates rather than accurate readings that are coming from the meters. So that has now come to the point where us as a ratepayers association are also frustrated, because now we don't have a problem with paying. However, we need to be aware of what we're paying for. We can't just ask us to fork out money. You know, you need to also show us where you charging us. Where are these rates coming from? Break down the funds. You know, we actually went to a point where we were recording our own meters and submitting them to the ESCOM database or the ESCOM app. And lo and behold, once we started doing that, the ESCOM app stopped working. So clearly, there's some mampumpans playing games here, and we as the ratepayers are getting messed around. I mean, we need to call spade a spade, and stop pussyfooting around the matters that are actually at hand, where we actually have people that are incompetent, that haven't been running the government for the past 30 years, that need to leave. I mean, politics, we've got career politicians where politics isn't a service, that is a career service. It's a service for the people. And we've made that mistake that we've lost that direction in moving towards the people and moving towards our own pockets. So in terms of that, there's a lot.
Some very important comments you made there, Madoda, and I think you're calling a spade a spade. I want Kanta Naidoo to come in. The residents of Mountain Rise, Allendale, Central, PMburg, and those other areas have complained that they're paying rates and in return they're getting minimal. If you work out the scale 1 to 10, they're probably getting 3 out of 10 services in respect of what they're paying. And what these residents are saying is they're cross-subsidizing. And I think Madoda is mentioning that a large amount of this money is because of maladministration. And those city officials are the same fellows that are continuing to run amok with no accountability. And the administrator, he's complicit with the politicians out there. Perhaps you want to comment on these issues, Kanta?
Yes, you know, they're quite correct in so far as those issues. In one particular issue that's inequitable that was recently implemented was the multiple billing. And it was inequitable. It was certain areas that were chosen that would be affected. Sorry, I'm just making sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So insofar as that is concerned, correct. I wonder if you'll allow me the opportunity also. I just want to speak about the court judgment you brought about earlier on.
Yes, by all means, go ahead.
I welcome that precedent because I think that would then put our councillors on the spot insofar as their decisions that they make, and they'd be more circumspect in taking those votes. We sit at full council meetings, and of course, we're not allowed to make comment or vote at those full council meetings, but we are privy to see councillors taking decisions for our pockets that affect our pockets. But these are councillors that are in areas that are not in paying areas, for example. So I think, making those decisions, like a recent decision Msunduzi now took, that they are now going to be giving amnesty to people who have bypassed meters, that in itself shows me that you are rewarding criminal behavior. I think decisions like that would be more circumspect. I welcome this decision, and my brain is actually working on how we could use this now as a tool to challenge that particular decision. So thank you for that opportunity as well.
It probably should have been the other way around. That those that are paying their rates and taxes should be given concessions rather than the people that are criminal.
Exactly.
But I want to yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I said if a municipality was run like a business, we wouldn't be where we are today. It should be a results-based business.
Yes, correct. Linda, you may want to add in a comment or two on the Woodlands area, and are you foreseeing the same problem? There's a lot of non-revenue utilities in that area?
Yes, there are. In a lot of the informal settlements, unfortunately, they're not metered. And as we've also said, there is no address. And there is no road. So if you're going to an informal settlement, who are you going to bill? And where are you going to find Linda? It's also then amazing how when they go to their local councillors or the municipality and ask for a proof of address, what address do they give? You know, so that's where then the challenge and the issue is. The other one is, as now Kantha is now saying, and also Madoda, where I think it's across the board where the billing system is not on track, where municipality is not doing their jobs. At the end of the day, we send readings of our meters every month, but you will still get, when you open your municipal bill and you check it out, it says their estimate. So why is there an estimate, and why am I paying exorbitant bills? Why am I double billed? Or why does a pensioner at the end of the month get a bill of 2,000 Rand, you know, with an estimate on there? So it's an issue that we all have across the board, that if unanimously we come together to try and find a way of addressing and holding our local government and municipalities accountable, we will get some headway.
Definitely. The short reason for estimated bills is that the meter readers are too lazy to read the bills.
Absolutely.
In the morning and coming back in the afternoon, but we'll discuss that on another occasion. We're running out of time. I want to thank Madoda, Linda, and Mshali and Kantha for making some very important comments. And I know time is running out on us. Anthony, you just want to wrap up in PM-Berg. What's the way forward? You reckon 2026, we need a complete change of councillors, and we need people who can deliver, and those councillors can start getting rid of these officials. Anthony?
That's quite correct, because as you mentioned, that 2026 is just around the corner, and I think we need to put the pressure on all political parties because they're not performing, and the low caliber of the councillors that they're actually bringing onto the council to be elected. They need to up the game there, because we cannot afford to have these incompetent councillors, but also the officials as well too. So I think we as residents, we need to really be much more proactive. We need to be more educated around how voting works and how the local government works. And this is what Mark is doing, to do a lot of education and awareness raising amongst the citizens, to educate them around how to go about voting and how things work, especially in local government, so that we can also play our part, but then to be more proactive. And I think there's going to be major changes come 2026, and we're going to see a lot of changes in Msunduzi as well.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. Some very important comments. Just a top off on two important points from my side you must watch for. Continue with the oversight role to ensure that you get whatever service delivery you can from Msunduzi. You're going to basically have to, curry favor with the Oaks to get some kind of delivery, and then mobilize for 2026 where you get your number crunching right, so that when you start, nominating your leaders for positions of ward councillors, you capsize the apple cart and you get the right people in. But I thank you guys for joining us in PM-Berg. Certainly, we will get you all back, maybe not next week, the following week again, and we'll continue with this discussion. I'm going to briefly continue and wrap up with our officials from the Ratepayer Associations in Durban. Ernest, I want to bring you in now. Ernest, you've heard our ratepayers talking, and they really cut fall with the municipalities.
Yeah.
And I know that you're a single rep representing the Democratic Alliance from eThekwini, and you're not afraid to chat and
Sure.
But you're in the minority. So we're wrapping up now. How do you see the situation changing, other than saying 2026, we're going to make things happen between now and 2026? How are you going to improve service delivery?
Well, there's a lot of points have been raised since the moment I wanted by everyone. And I think it's important that citizens arm themselves with knowledge. Number one, you don't go into an election and say, I'm going to vote for somebody, because remember, the person you are voting for must reflect your interests as a ratepayer and a resident. The competency and all of that, that is why, from our point of view, and I say our point of view, specifically me as a public rep, you have to be accountable to your people at any given time. That means constant engagement. That's when they call on you. I mean, obviously, we have to be realistic about engagement and what constitutes engagement. 9 o'clock in the evening, 1 o'clock in the morning, depending on the type of issue, obviously, we have to be realistic about that. But in the same breath, A lot of the complaints that I see and hear from other communities is that you don't have constant engagement, you can't reach the person, you can't get a proof of address, you can't get the services, your roads fixed, the like. So the community needs to arm themselves with knowledge to say, well, this is what we want this person to accomplish for us. And that is what they need to arm themselves. Whether or not 2026 succeeds or fails in eThekwini, as well as every other municipality across the country, is dependent on the citizens that go to the polls. Right now, as it stands, we have 60 councillors as the DA. The ANC has 98. That's an automatic doubling almost. So, well, yeah, plus. But the reality is they are in a position which they need other political parties to survive. That means the bargaining, hard bottling, and the rest, and the deals in the background. And I always encourage residents to please take to look into who they vote for. Not just go and because somebody says do it. Why are you voting for that person? Are they competent enough? Because the reality is, and it was raised earlier about the literacy rates and the like and whatever, that is not pushed enough. I mean, there are courses the municipality puts you on, but you as a councillor are elected to speak on behalf of your constituents. And that you must be able to be competent enough. And it's the same thing I raised, I think, 2 or 3 sessions ago, where people don't even know what is sitting in front of them in the agenda. They don't know how the pluses and checks balance. They don't understand the project analysis. They don't understand technical reports. They don't understand a lot of things. So you also don't want to elect somebody who is there just to make noise. And this is one thing I always caution citizens about. Don't be used by, and I'm going to unfortunately say the smaller parties in this one, because they often sit on the fence and are often swayed by which other means, whether it's brown envelopes or this, that. That's obviously knowledge I don't have. But the reality of it is, how do those people or councillors benefit the residents? Because I've seen many one-man bands side with the ANC. They side with the ANC, side with the EFF, and the economic principles are not congruent with what we are trying to achieve in our municipalities. You ask me if this is going to be a simple win. No, it's not. But with the constant pressure of civil society, one, alongside with the active and working councillors, on issues that they can address. Now, we must also be realistic about what we can address, because I understand there are limitations placed on us as public representatives. I cannot, by the same acts that we have spoken about, I cannot go and say to an electricity official, any official, you will do this. I cannot. I am prohibited. You know the law, you know the Systems and Structures Act. And I can be sanctioned, charged, or fired because of that. A lot of the time, residents are not familiar with those technicalities, and they assume you snap your fingers, the truck comes. The reality is, to give everybody a background, we phone and harass people to say, when is the truck coming? Why are the people striking? Why is this thing taking so long to be fixed? And the problem comes in where the same politicians we're speaking about, the cadre deployment, people in whatever format, are either withholding information from us, or they are not working with us for the benefit of the residents. And that is unfortunately the part we need to push. So we need to work together. That's where our power lies. That's where 20, remember I've been saying it for a while, 2026 needs to be a balance of power across the board and people who are able to think.
Dr. Annie, we're wrapping up. We got about 10 minutes left. 15 minutes over time now. So we started late. And I know our representatives are very keen in listening. You mentioned that during the Mike Sutcliffe era and before, queries on service deliverables were few and far between. And I was in that section, and I know whether it was human settlements, whether it was billing, you had efficient people. In the engineers department, you had people that used to respond to road management. There was an asphalt plant in eThekwini, and the head, roads used to send the guys out. If there's an underground leak and the road is dug, the next day, the same department will come in and patch up the roads and make sure that the work is done properly, because the inspectors would go in. So, problems were few and far between. Now there's more problems than repairs being undertaken. And there's a fundamental change that's required. And the reason why it was successful then is, as one of our colleagues mentioned, accountability. There was monitoring, there was performance management. Now, I've been going through some correspondence from the different ratepayer associations, for which I have time to just, gap in and see what's going on, whether it's ORA, whether it's Springfield Ratepayer, whether it's ERPM. I don't want to be involved with too many ratepayer associations, but it's interesting to note that you all are making some gains in ensuring that people respond to service deliverables in the different areas. I mentioned to PM Berg that it's very important that you'll work with those that are in council to get whatever you can out of them. Otherwise, if you simply do not work, then there'll be no service delivery. Your closing comments, Annie, in that regard.
Well, what I want to say is that in terms of our particular area, we try to enable our residents with information. And I know that Councillor Ernest has alluded to that. And what I want to say is that for anybody who's on our group, where we try to reach as many residents as possible, we do try to provide as much information as possible. It's engaging. It's not just a one-way kind of a dialogue. Basically, the idea is that residents can engage with us, ratepayers can engage with us if they're unclear about anything. Where they need clarity and clarification, we will come back with information. We are also quite fortunate that we have the PR counselor on the group to assist us if we need direction and we need guidance. So basically, that has been working well. But what I also want to say with regard to the way we've been operating is that our collaboration with other ratepayer associations has proven to be very useful. And I think it is something that we can depend on going forward. If you ask, how do we see or what do we see going forward that's actually going to assist us? And I think that these collaborations work very well. Alison did make mention of the fact that that we are part of UBCO, and this works well because when we have our meetings, we have our specific issues that concern us, but as common issues, I think we're able to sit, discuss, embrace those issues, and discuss how we're going to resolve this. And what I want to also mention, Mr. Sakur, is that I'm glad that Mr. Matala made reference to that in terms of the acknowledgement of skills, that was a project that Alison had led with regard to UBCO in terms of identifying these skills. And I think that I just want to stress that because that was an amazing project. We had some really outstanding engineers involved in the project. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but they've already made inroads. They've met with the mayor, they've had these initial meetings, and it's proved to be very fruitful. Alison can elaborate on that, but that is what I want to say, that as ratepayers working together, finding common ground has really assisted us.
Very encouraging news. Shesta, you might want to just add on what Annie mentioned.
What can I say?
I want to give you a bit of a lead into what ratepayers are doing, because I don't just read, I try to absorb what are they mentioning. Whenever complaints are being lodged for water leaks and electricity outages, you all are very quick to advise people to report these faults, and you'll give them contact numbers.
Correct.
And within hours, there's a response. Because whilst we're saying it's not all doom and gloom, we're saying we have to work with whoever is there and probably just, try to encourage them, motivate them and say, you guys are doing a good work, so that you're getting something out of the municipality to help those widows, those grantees, those pensioners. Because in the Springfield Ratepayers Association group, I seen a comment coming through from one of the residents who was being harassed by some people that was living with her and assaulting her, and she couldn't stay in her own house, and the Ratepayer Associations got together and they dealt with that individual and got him out to assist. That was an example of GBV or whatever. What I'm saying is that when these complaints come in, you all as officials or sort of administrators of the Ratepayer Associations are able to assist and ensure that certain emergency interventions
Mm.
are undertaken to assist the residents in the area.
Correct.
Mr. Sakur, can I just say
Yes, you can come in.
before Shaisa comes in, I just want to say that there are in certain instances we cannot cross the line, and you are, I'm sure, aware of that as well. But we make it quite clear what we can and what we cannot do, because in some instances our hands are tied. There might be legal consequences of which we are aware, and obviously there are privacy issues. So we have to be quite cautious, but at the same time, ultimately, our intention is to assist. What I also want to say, and Shaista can come in here, is that as the ARA, I think that we have, if I can say so, a very good track record. Shaista does an amazing job in terms of controlling our group as the secretary. She's absolutely phenomenal, to the point where she's been voted as councillor by our residents.
You know,
They
the-
want her as the next
You mean to
councillor.
stand for next election? Now, this is where I was coming to.
Yes.
This is
So-
where I was coming to, and perhaps Alison will have to comment on that as well. Leadership devolves from those that are practical
Absolutely.
during that reign of office as Ratepayer Association. Shaisa, you want to come in?
Yeah, we, when you, in terms of like you're talking about gender-based violence, that's not something we'll directly get involved in, but we have those CPF who we work directly with. So we give them a call and say, you know what, can you help in this situation? When they need help, vice versa, you got to work together. We in the same community. With regards to service delivery, a lot of our stuff gets done. We're one of the first areas to be lit. We had our street lights all done. In fact, even when we have them re-repaired, we're one of the first to have it done.
I don't think there's any street that
No.
doesn't have a light.
A light bulb. All our street names are redone.
When I drive in that area to the mosque, I see it's
You
well
see,
lit. Yes.
And our road markings
are done.
You're not going to see that in
But you're
any
not
other
focusing
area.
on RD Naidu Road. It's
So
always
RD
blacked out.
RD Naidu is half on us and half. Okay, so
Half
RD
of
Naidu in
Springfield.
particular, their street lights. We've got it repaired twice. They keep stealing the cables. So I've reported it now
But
for the
isn't the
third time.
CPF getting involved in apprehending these thieves? I know there's
Well,
a lot
if
of
they,
areas.
if they manage to, they will help. But I mean, most of the time the thieves are gone before you can even get there. The problem we also have is with trying to get everybody active. You have a handful of people that actually want to get involved. Only when it affects them, they have no water. Shaisa, can you help me? Can you help me? Other than that, you're not going to hear about anybody, showing any interest in anything else that happens. So we need to sort of ignite the people. We also need to get the youth involved. They seem to be into TikTok more. We don't see them. We're getting older.
Very
We
important,
need
very
them
important.
to come in to do, to teach them and to show them. Because you got to be after the municipality. You cannot leave them. You got to nag.
Definitely.
You nag until you get what you need.
No, thanks. I think you're hearing it direct from your secretary that to get work done, you got to be nagging. Norman, you want to come in?
Absolutely.
In your Bluff area, the people are keen and they're hearing us. They're saying, what are you going to do about crime in the area? What are you going to do about water leaks, improving service delivery? Are you going to chaff the officials there? You're going to work with the councillor? What are the proactive steps you're taking? Municipal elections is 18 months away. When you're going to hope there's a change. But in the interim, you want to have some degree of service delivery. What's your proposal?
From the Bluff Ratepayers and Residents Association perspective, is we are extremely proactive in terms of identifying problem areas, finding solutions for those areas. We work with our local ward councillor. We have a very good working relationship. But what I would like to say about our council system, I think that we need to get to a system where it's mandatory that a ward councillor has skin in the game. They must live in the ward they represent,
Yes.
and they even better should be a ratepayer in the ward that they represent. It's very easy to slow down or slow walk something when you're not directly affected by the service delivery issues because you don't live in the area where that is. It astounds me why political parties would bring people who live on the other side of town to represent communities. If you don't live in the community, you don't understand the nuances of the problems that they're having. So that's one change I'd like to see. The other thing that I'm noticing in the times that we go to council as ratepayers is it's a rubber stamping exercise. You know, I try and keep up with the meetings, and the city manager will read someone, he'll read an item, and he'll go, committee recommends, and everybody puts their hands up, and they're off to the next item. So obviously decisions are made in committee. I understand that, because there are committees that handle the certain issues that run the city. But if the councillors in a full council sitting are the final decision-making authority, they need to know what's going on. Ernest raised it earlier. Sometimes people sit there, they don't even know what they're voting on. It's shameful that we run a city council. We are almost a $70 billion rand a year metropolitan. To have a council of 222 people where people don't even understand what they're voting on in council is that's a dereliction of duty. And the political parties are responsible to us as the citizens of the city to make sure the people they send into those seats are actually fit for purpose. And I think if we have that at that level, then the rest will start to fall into place. But unless we sort the problem out from the top, you're never going to sort out the issues.
Correct. Well said. Alison, you want to wrap up? You got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing that we have spoken about is identifying the problem and then identifying a solution for that. Now, one of our biggest problems that we've sort of just glossed over and have not really delved into much here is the level of corruption that we are dealing with. Now, how do you address the corruption problem? Lifestyle audits. Our AG audits the books every year, but they don't actually delve deeper into the lifestyle of the councillors, the politicians, the close family members. That lifestyle audit, as far as I'm concerned, needs to be part of the AG's process, and they cannot give an audit opinion if those documents are not included in the audit. So for me, that is a crucial aspect that perhaps they need to look into. But yeah, as I said earlier, my biggest thing is take the political system away. We've seen throughout South Africa, local government is failing, and they are failing as a result of the political system that influences decisions. Municipalities are supposed to be service delivery, nothing else. But yet, our entire political system is being game played at municipal level, and the whole country's economy has suffered as a result of that. So, you know, we got to ask ourselves, with all these beautiful resources we have in South Africa, this is a beautiful country. We've got such a diverse range of people, beautiful people, yet the politicians use and exploit past hurt that we have suffered for their own political advantage, and that's disgusting. We should be on the world stage playing as a first world country with the beautiful resources we have. Yet we are now almost in the bottom rung of the worst countries in the world. That's just absolutely disgusting.
Absolutely correct. And, you know, just to add on sort of the country, we number one in world rugby. In cricket, we probably number 3 or 4. I know sometimes we just mess up. In soccer, we're improving. We're number 1 on the AFRICON at this point in time. And our athletes are doing well. We got sort of all the facilities in this world. But I'm going to ask our economist to wrap up. I know he's been worried the rand is fluctuating a bit, but the petrol price is coming down gradually. The all-share index is fairly stable. Hassan, you got 2 minutes to wrap up.
Sure.
What's your suggestion for the way forward? I know you said fire those officials and bring in new political leaders. That's 2026. But short term, what's your recommendations?
Well, I think look, there's a lot of while there's a lot of negative news, there is also a lot of good news. So I think since in the last 6 months or 9 months, whatever it is, you've had gradual improvements taking place. So we take the wins and we continue to build on the wins. So there is going to be negativity and the like, but I think we build on it. So, for example, You had the state signing in an agreement today. I think Minister McPherson they signed an agreement related to the construction mafia. So first time now in how many years that maybe there's a concerted effort to try and address a big issue.
So monies will be used for construction rather than corruption.
Paying this 30% or whatever it is to people that don't deserve it. So that encourages employment, encourages the small and medium enterprises to be active in the economy and create employment. Secondly, you've seen unemployment actually slowly coming back. Came back from 34% to 30%. 32%, still very high, but at least it's moving in the right direction. Thirdly, you've seen inflation now, the lowest level in 4.5 years. So it's come back below 3% after a long time. We've had last year was an absolutely torrid year in terms of inflation. Many of us all around here and across the country have felt it in our back pockets and felt it, but it's slowly easing off, which is good news. So that means potentially we're going to get further interest rate cuts, which again encourages spending and helps again those that are suffering and in terms of their mortgage payments and the like. So again, potentially good news. And lastly, we are a country of resilience, and whether it's in the sporting field, whether it's in the fact that we came through a largely bloodless democracy and the like, we had massive amounts of immigration that had taken place over a number of years. Guess what?
Coming back.
Immigration is slowing down. And if you speak to agents or housing agents in Gauteng, Cape Town, to a lesser extent KZN, Gauteng, despite the fact that they've got a big water crisis and the like, and they've got bigger issues, I think, than many of us also in KZN, some of their municipalities are really, they're in a dire. People are actually, there's a lot of South African expats wanting to come back. And they're actually buying homes at the moment and coming back. First time in a long time, which tells you the grass is not always greener on the other side. So we may, moan and talk about there is a lot of issues, but it's not only in South Africa. It happens across the world. And I think the fact that people are now getting involved, you need a lot more people to be involved. The ratepayers associations are doing fantastic jobs. In the last few years, you've seen a more active role by them, and they're making a difference. And I think you need more and more people to participate in that. Yep. You need more and more people to participate in civic and governmental organizations. That's the only way you can make things change. By sitting on the sideline and sitting on a WhatsApp group and just complaining and moaning about things, not going to make a difference. You have to, when there's townhouse meetings or the like, or town hall meetings, go and attend it. Voice your issues and try and make a difference. And you need more and more younger people to participate.
Well concluded, Hassan. I know, Ernest, you were wanting to say a word or two, but I'm already half an hour over my time, and the housewives are complaining. The housewives are complaining that I'm keeping their husbands awake because they're listening to the program. They reckon it's good, nice, interesting. And even these ladies from the ratepayer associations, I don't think it's past their bedtime because they till 11, 12 o'clock they're making comments in the chat. You've got 2 minutes to wrap up, Ernest.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to delve into some of the hectic stuff that was raised here.
Try to wrap it up in 2 minutes.
No. You remember, you told me 2 minutes. I'm restarting the clock. Okay. I hear what you guys are saying. And you know what? To a large extent, I do agree. But one of the biggest and most important things, and it's like you were reading my brain, saying the reality is residents need to get involved in one way, form, fashion, another. Sitting back is not an option. And that is the number one role here. And unfortunately, that's the biggest problem we face as public reps, is that we hold a public meeting. It's generally the same people with one or two new faces that come along and two old people have done something. So there needs to be a larger concentration of public engagement. We cannot have people always going on about the same people, and it's the same people, the same issues, but the community does not want to do CPF patrols. We cannot have people who do not want to attend feedback sessions when we hold them, because that's where a lot of discontent comes in. When if we don't put something online which people can read it at the ease of their fingers, instead come and actively participate, that's where a lot of the discontent comes from. I hear what you're saying about being familiar with the ward dynamics. But there is provision in the municipality that you have to stay somewhere in the metro. I personally, all right, as a councillor, when I was elected, I had to get in tune. Although I'd been staying all over the metro, you learn to understand the dynamics and the cross threads between communities. You learn to understand what plagues your communities. If a public rep is serious, and that is the determining factor, does that person, it's not always easy to afford a place. And I'm going to use my ward as an example. You can't buy a house there if you're earning 30,000 Rand a month. You cannot. Rent is expensive. We have to take these social issues into account. Rent is expensive. I, as a public rep, spend at least 25% of my own money on certain things, community-orientated things. All right? That means cleanups and the like and whatever. At the end of the day, how serious your public rep is depends on what they can show for you and how committed they are. I'm not sure every public rep is different. They all have a different approach. But the reality is, as long as that concentration is around betterment of your community in any form, fashion, whether it's community projects to make places safer, whether it's increasing the parks, the safety, the like, all of that. The reality of it is you as residents have to participate. There's no question about it. You determine who goes into that seat. That is how important it is. And that is why what we can do now, support the organizations, but we need to find a congruent way of working with one another. Because at the end of the day, and I'm sorry to say, I fundamentally disagree with you as a person who goes to the polls. Because if you take away the people's right to have a representative of their choosing to sit in local government, you are taking away local government. Essentially, well, no, but the problem with that comes down to no matter who you put anywhere, greed is always going to be a fundamental factor. Whether you're a politician, whether you're a person in the municipality, whether you're the finance or the treasurer, they're going to be fundamental and determining factors. That is why cadres get into the system. That is why tanker drivers get shot. That is why people end up going and losing their lives because of one thing: human trait, politician or not, greed. So at the end of the day, the determining factor in our current system is who we put there. We've put the ANC there for 30 years. It is time to boot them out. We must not be led around by our noses. We must not, because it is very easy, and I'm glad you said the point, that people are playing on the racial inequalities, because that is what's happening here. And I'm happy to hear that in our informal areas, where they, like the gentleman that you raised from PMB, that communities are starting to say, whoa, hold on, this is not the game we signed up for. We wanted an equal footing across the board. And that is what we need to do. Go to the polls and fight for the people that are fighting for you, not people who are going to sit there and you can't find them for the next 5 years.
Ernest, I think you're correct, but we're going to have to emphasize that closer to the elections. What we're talking about is a compromise now. I want to congratulate our brothers and sisters in Pietermaritzburg and Durban, being members of these ratepayer associations and doing a phenomenal job at their own time and expense to assist our people. This humanitarian aid is crucial because Al-Ansar Foundation, as a humanitarian organization, we notice the difficulties people are facing, whether it's utilities that they cannot pay, the rentals they cannot pay, they don't have food on the table, and we got to get donors to assist these people. We are now having what we call an annual Durban Summer Souk at the ICC, and I invite all of you all to join us there. We're going to have 330 emerging traders to ply their trade at the Durban Exhibition Center, so that whatever they earn in that 14-day period, they'll be able to sustain themselves for the next 6 months. We're capacitating, but the city is blasting us with a high tariff, so that we have to recover those tariffs from the rentals we charge those traders. But on the one side, the city is not understanding the need to create entrepreneurial opportunities for emerging traders and organizations that want to do or create these opportunities. We're going to meet with the city about it, because the higher rentals they pay, the less their profits. So I want all ratepayer organizations, humanitarian organizations, to look at opportunities for our people, employment opportunities, etc. Because unemployment, as Hassan will tell you, is over 37% as we speak. And these are people that need to be employed. So there are huge challenges, but time is running out, and we'll talk about it. It's 20 to 11, and the housewives are going to take off with me and say, listen, what you up to here? Annie, you got 2 minutes to just say
No,
a few words.
I don't need 2 minutes. I just need a minute
Okay.
to thank you are to give us this opportunity, because I think as ratepayers, we need to get our views across. And I'm glad that Councillor Smith has made the point that we need to get more residents and ratepayers on board. And he's absolutely correct about the fact, and we know this, we struggle as ratepayers, that we only have the same people involved all the time. So change is what we need. And with that, I want to end with this. And because it has been a resounding theme, that change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we seek. And that's Barack Obama.
No, that's excellent. I want to conclude with the earlier comment I made from political analyst Imran Bakas as a closing sort of support or indication to our civic reps. In these choppy waters, South Africa's civil society faces a critical question. Should our civil society remain genuinely non-aligned, or will we allow ourselves to be drawn into escalating global tensions, which means that you're going to start linking up to political parties? You can choose that, but in the end of the day, the emphasis must be to ensure improved service delivery in that area. On that note, that brings us to the end of News in Focus for this evening. We had a vibrant discussion. I thank all our reps from the different ratepayer associations for joining us. This is not the be-all and end-all of our discussions with you all. We will certainly invite you to future sort of programs of this nature. Feel free to contact my office should you all wish to discuss a particular subject, because I know we can't exhaust all the service delivery problems we're facing. Over the last couple of months, we've been discussing different issues, whether it's water. We tried to cover the curtailment, but we haven't, Ernest, had much time. Pietermaritzburg, they're complaining we're giving them less time, but there were 4 or 5 reps there. And these people all want to be in the program. In fact, there's 3 other organizations we're saying, come in, we want to come in, but next week we're going to have them in. So if any one of y'all feel you want to come in and make contributions, I think our listeners out there will benefit, but I don't want to keep them till 11:15 every Wednesday. Round about 10:15 is closing time, just to ensure it's within the 2-hour period. So my closing comments is that we all are believers in Almighty, and we pray that Almighty guides our leaders towards the righteous path. They're holding a position of trust, and most certainly they must deliver for the people. And as our economist says, get value for money for the rates and service charges you pay. On that road, next week, Wednesday, we'll have this show once again. Until then, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our technician. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.